everybody, I'm Matt Valley. Welcome to the Rock and Roll Research Podcast, where we share the super cool backstories and side gigs of the insights and analytics pros that you trust. Today's guest is Bernice Klaassen. Now, how do I know Bernice? We met through Graham Ford's Punk MRX community. We've got a mutual friend on there, Susan Griffin. It's a super cool place. If you haven't checked that out already on WhatsApp, definitely give that a spin. Now, Bernice has had this really fascinating journey that started working for a Dutch research agency called Blau Research, very fast growing in the 90s, right? But from there, he ended up in Asia working with TNS Kantar, did a pretty long stint at Ipsos, and then found himself on the client side leading regional insights. By regional, that's APAC, Middle East, and Europe, regional insights for Citibank. And ultimately, he was the SVP of digital strategy, digital sales and marketing for Citibank in those regions. It's a pretty big job. But now he's in the south of Spain, and he's got kind of a very interesting career pivot coming. So I'm super excited to talk about that on today's podcast. So welcome to the show, Bernice.
Thank you, Matt. I'm very excited to be here. I'm a big fan of your show, so very honored.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. So before we get started, I do want to send a shout out to the sponsor of today's episode, which is Insight Sutras. Insight Sutras, very cool company providing expert fielding, operations, and analytical support to the consultants and market research agencies that make this whole space go. I know that with Insight Sutras, no project is too big or too small. So check them out. Get in touch at insightsutras.com. Thanks so much for your sponsorship. Appreciate that. All right, Bernice, let's get started. So
Yes.
How did you get into the insight space in the first place? Tell us that story.
Oh man, that was my dream since year 6 or 7. It was I want to be a market. No. So I think as everyone in the industry, I somehow got shoehorned into the industry. So I started actually very early in the 90s when I was studying. So I started studying actually. I wanted to be an artist. So I started studying design. But then I pivoted to music, and then I started to run out of money, so I needed to have like a night job. So I started working for a company in Rotterdam who basically did market research, right? As a field interviewer, so doing like lots of face-to-face interviews, I think I must have done thousands of interviews. So very good learning school. And then later on, because I was working so much, they said, okay, we also have a role in data entry, right? So at that time, started working in data entry with SPSS data entry at that time, right? The DOS-based program. And I started like nights and weekends, and we had a group of friends, which was great. And then later on, after that, I decided initially I wanted to go into music, but I decided, okay, music, maybe keep it for a hobby. So in the end, I started studying psychology.
Okay.
But I'm a bad psychologist, so I did social psychology, like advertising and consumer behavior, which I found really interesting, right? So I wrote my thesis about behavioral economics. And then again, I think, in my 7th year of studying and running out of money again. And then a friend of mine was working for this Dutch company called Blau with like a graduate position. And that clicked, right? So I talked to the owners, two very smart people that at that time were very young, but very technology forward.
Sure.
So I started there, and from there onwards, it's been like a 20, 25 years journey. But I got really into it. So when I started at Blau, I very quickly, because they grew very fast, right? So I got lots of opportunities.
Right.
And in my 3rd or 4th year, I got the opportunity to set up an online panel, right? At that time, online research was just starting, and they were very forward thinking. So they said, okay, we should do something with that. So I was like employee number 1 of that startup. Which I really loved, right? And we worked with Harris Interactive in the US with propensity weighting, and so that whole thing took off, and that panel grew like mad. In the end, they sold it to SSI, at that time, I think it's Nata or whatever it is.
Familiar old names.
But very early in my career, I got really fascinated with, basically, technology on the one hand and research on the other hand, right? So how can you apply technology in a way to understand people better and to do research smarter? So I think if you look at the whole arc of my career, right, even when I went to Asia with TNS and Ipsos, right? So in TNS, I set up their global online communities practice. We did like the first social listening project in Asia, which was a complete nightmare. It was for Intel. We sold like a 10-country social listening project in 2008 with a vendor out of Switzerland who didn't know what they were doing. So it was
That's messy.
lots of lessons learned, but I've always been fascinated and I've always been really liking to build new stuff, right? Build new teams, build new capabilities. When I went to Ipsos, I did, similar kind of thing. So I built, a startup in Asia that did, like their online communities practice, their social intelligence practice, lots of digital stuff. And even when I moved to Citibank, right, it was really about, because when I moved to Citibank at that time, it was really about, okay, we've got, research practice, but it's really old fashioned. So can you help us, modernize that, right? So even there it was about, okay, how can we make this more actionable? How can we bring in all kind of big data? How can we bring in analytics, web analytics? How can we really make this a much more impactful kind of practice? So I think that's been the theme throughout my career, really about, okay, how can we marry technology, but really from the perspective of doing more impactful research instead of the the other way around. So I find the technology in itself not so interesting. It's really about, okay, how can it enable us, right? How can we do better, cooler things with it from a research perspective?
Sure, sure. So let me go back to something that you said. You were considering a career in music. Tell us more about that.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So I've been. So I come from a very small village in Holland, where at that time the only thing you could do is do your homework or read books. So I've been playing guitar actually since I was 7. Um, and then because I had nothing else to do, right? So I think I had this period from when I was like 10 till 15, 16, where I was like playing like 4 or 5 hours a day, and I started to play in a band as well. Um, yeah, and at some point, like I said, initially I wanted to become an artist. I wanted to become a designer, but
Sure.
I don't know. After 1 year, I was like, okay, maybe that's not for me. Then I was like, okay, I wanted to be like a full-time musician, so I wanted to go to music college.
Yeah.
Um, But then the problem was, so I was practically, I'm a pretty decent guitar player, but I didn't know any theory, right? If you go music, college, you need to know your theory. So I did a university study called musicology, which is basically the whole theory of music, right? And history and that kind of stuff. I was like, okay, I do that for 1 year, and then I've got enough in my suitcase to apply for music college. But then I started to do that study, and then no, it was horrible, man. We had to sing, Gregorian songs, and you get all this, in-depth theory, and I was like, okay, I need to keep this a hobby. I just need to do, something serious with it, with my life. So, but I mean, I still, I played in bands. We recorded a CD. So music is a big part of my life. So I'm a big music
Ah,
fan. So.
yeah. Okay. Well, we'll definitely have to exchange CDs or something. So
Yes, 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 yes.
love to hear the stuff that you did back in the day. So, um,
Yeah,
okay. So tell us. So you were at Citi. You were in Singapore, I think, at the time. Uh,
yeah.
how
17 years. Yeah.
Spain. So tell us about that transition and what's next for you.
Yeah, that was more of I think at that time, a lifestyle choice. When I was in Citibank, I think at some point, Citi got a new CEO and she decided to sell off all the consumer. I was part of the consumer bank. She was selling off all the consumer banks because they didn't make enough money. We were part of the regional team. I mean, no need for a regional team if you don't have any countries anymore, right? So they said, okay, we can either give you, another job in Citibank, or we give you a nice payout. And we've always been planning, another sabbatical. We actually tried 3 times before to get to Spain, but for various reasons, didn't work out. So I was like, okay, this is really good timing. I just want to take some time out, move to another part of the world. And then also I've got 4 kids, right? So I thought, like,
Yeah.
Singapore is fantastic, but it's also a bit of a bubble. So I was like, okay, it's good to go to another part of the world. We picked Spain. It was a bit 50-50 between Italy and Spain, but in the end we picked Spain. So I'm in Malaga now. I took a sabbatical, and then I decided, okay, I don't want to just sit on the beach, right? So I did an MBA in sustainability management because I wanted to
Yeah.
be quite deliberate, right? I mean, I've done all these things in research. And I was like, okay, for the next 15, 20 years, what do I want to do next, right? I didn't want to rush into another agency or client side job. I was like, okay, I want to take some time out. And I had the idea to pivot, back to sustainability. I used to have, some startups like a long time ago, and I was like, okay, I want to do something meaningful. So I did this MBA, and then also figured out that, sustainability, I mean, it's very fascinating. I'm very passionate about it, but jobs in sustainability, most of them are actually, I find them quite boring, right? Lots about data and reporting and legislation and all that kind of stuff. So I was like, okay, maybe it's not that. And at the same time, I saw the cool stuff that's happening in an industry, right? I mean, I've been part of, all the innovation waves that, came before, and suddenly you've got all this AI stuff happening and new entrants and big stories and big promises. And I was like, okay, right? I like change. I like technology. I like, market research. So I want to do something with that. But at the same time, right, I have this sustainability thing. So I decided, okay, I'm just going to set up my own boutique agency. But I want to focus on, applying research and, just enterprise grade research, but really innovative research, and really help impact organizations, right? It can be NGOs, can be, sustainability departments of companies, can be startups. I want to help these companies and, in that way, have my contribution to, try to make this world a little bit of a better place. So that's what I just started just a couple of months back. And then, next to that, I also work with, quite a lot of startups and agencies that, either have like, technology, AI-based technology and want to enter the research space, or agencies that want to figure out, okay, how do we adapt these new tools? What can they do for us? So I work with them on a consulting basis to help them figure it out with, like, go-to-market strategy or product development, just to fund my passion project, which is, helping these impact companies. So.
Yeah. Well, I love that you are keeping a foot in this space, because you're one of my favorite people to follow on LinkedIn,
Oh.
because you're prolific about sharing really thought-provoking perspectives on AI and synthetic data and all kinds of things that we're all wrestling with right now. So I really appreciate that. So I'm curious from your perspective then, as you sort of look out forward into this insight space, where do you think we're headed if you're placing your bets?
Well, I'm placing my bet. So I think I'm very optimistic, right? And maybe very naive, but I actually think I'm very optimistic for our profession. Biggest reason being is, if you look at, say, a lot of the stuff that's happening now, right? It's all about, driving costs down, increasing speed, right? Which is really great. I think the mistake that, a lot of, if you listen to a lot of the stories and the narratives, right, that go, online, whether it's research or consulting, it's all about, X is dying, Y is dying, consulting is imploding, you can now, for $1,000, you can create, a McKinsey deck, right? I mean, I think that's all exaggerated, let me say it nicely. But I also think, everyone is looking at it like a fixed pie, right? Like, okay, we have, the current state, and we see that shrinking because we see layoffs, we see clients getting more stuff in-house, there's more do-it-yourself, right? So conclusion, our jobs are disappearing. How I look at it, and I just wrote about that, right, with the iceberg, but I see it as a pyramid. I think traditionally there's only a very small piece of all the companies that are around there that can afford, to do market research, right? Because it's expensive, it takes time, it takes resources. I think what you get, right, when research gets, faster and, a lot cheaper, suddenly that pie is going to expand exponentially, right? So all these companies that normally, couldn't afford that because it was too slow, or they didn't even think of it, they didn't have the money. Suddenly they become part of our addressable market, right? Yep. And there's a very famous, theory about that. It's called Jevons paradox. And that, you see it all, always happening, right? When there's new technology, people think that, things will shrink, but actually, the demand just goes up, right? It's economics 101, right? If, price goes down, then, demand will, grow enormously. So I'm very optimistic, right? So of course, right, you will see that, the pieces on the chessboard will, shuffle a little bit. So big agencies will have to adjust. I think a lot of because especially with big agencies, right? I mean, a lot of time that we spend is about execution, right? It's probably 80% execution, 20% is really proper thinking about, okay, how do I set it up? How do I analyze? How do I, create impact client side? I think that proportion will shift, right? Hopefully that will become like 50-50 or maybe even 60-40, where instead of spending all this time on, fieldwork management and data processing or whatever, right? We can start to, spend time on things that really ultimately make an impact for clients, right?
Right.
So in that sense, I think with the pie growing, I also think that, like boutique players and maybe even, small or maybe even, individual like freelancers, right? Suddenly their market will grow a lot, right? And they have the benefit of having that seniority to drive impact at the client side, right? And then not needing that whole, operational apparatus that you traditionally needed, right? That has always been the benefit of big agencies, but suddenly everyone can have that in their pockets. So I think
Right.
also that will change a lot, right? You probably will see, much more boutique agencies, networks, these kind of things. So I think that's a big shift. And one thing that I think the last thing that I'm really very passionate about is about, because research has traditionally been always quite reactive, right? There's an issue, there's a question. Okay, let's do some research. We spend a couple of weeks, we get an answer, and go on with it, right? Now, everything you hear about now about all the AI stuff, it's all about speed, right? Speed, a bit about cost. So instead of reactive research, we can do real-time research. I think we can now even go beyond that and start to do proactive research. And I think that's where a lot of value from researchers can come from, right? And with proactive research, I mean that, being able to identify all these questions that we even, haven't thought about asking yet, right? Like really small emerging trends, like, things that were not on our radar, crises that are happening right before we see them, which can bring a lot of value, right, in an organization, because that will, shift from, going very reactive to going very proactive. And we have a lot of, things in our toolkit already that can help with that, right? If you think about social intelligence, if you think about communities, if you think about, all going just beyond surveys and qual, right? All the data that's available in companies, right? From call center logs to, behavioral data. That's been around for a while, right? People will think, okay, social listening, right? Nothing new, communities, nothing new. I think the big difference there that I'm seeing is that with AI, I mean, these techniques are very powerful for picking up these really early signals and doing that proactive kind of research. But traditionally, they were very, intensive, right, to manage, because lots of data, very data heavy. And with AI, it's much easier to, to analyze that at scale and at real time. So I hope that, that shift, because I've been saying that for like 10 years already, right? It never happened. But I predict, we're going to do more proactive research. That's my big bet.
Yeah, yeah. I just think back when like the Survey Monkeys and inexpensive DIY tools like that came out. It was like the late 90s. I was
Yeah,
working with Market Tools. We had Zoomerang, which is a similar product. And there was so much concern about
yeah, yeah,
that sort of killing full
yeah,
service research and all this. But at the end of the day, it just enabled way more research. So a lot more business questions
yeah.
addressed with data. Not
Exactly, exactly. Yeah,
quality, of course, but
yeah,
but it was an explosion in terms of the amount of research that was done.
yeah. So hopefully we'll be busier than ever, Matt.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's see. I'll give it 1 or 2 years, right? That is probably in 1 or 2 years, this whole thing will set. I think the other thing, because I think AI is more of a general purpose technology, right? I don't think, it in itself, it's going to be a competitive differentiator, right? Everyone has access to the same technology, same models, it's relatively easy to build stuff. So ultimately, the things that make a difference is, still the thinking, the ability to create impact, etc. But it will probably take 1 or 2 years for things to settle, and then we'll know, okay, synthetic data, does it work or not? Where does it work? These AI moderated interviews, where do they fit in? I think everyone is still searching a little bit, right? Like, where does that fit in? And then you've got people on the one hand saying that, okay, this is going to kill everything. People on the other hand, they say, oh, this is not working at all. But it's going to sit somewhere in the middle. But we need to be a little bit patient to see where it plays out, I think.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
an
Well,
interesting journey.
it's a fun and exciting time for sure.
Yeah.
All right. So if you think about your media diet, um, what is it that you are listening to or reading or consuming for insight, inspiration, or enjoyment? Big, broad question.
For insights, um, I think quite a lot, right? So I really, first of all, music. I think music is, my biggest inspiration. So I listen to music all the time. I really like to watch documentaries. I don't watch TV, but I watch a lot of documentaries. So music documentaries, but also about,
Yeah.
historical, that kind of stuff. I think very specific for what we're working on. I've become, as you've probably noticed, quite active on LinkedIn in the past couple of months, just for myself to figure out, how it works, and to also to structure my own thinking. But I really started to appreciate. I've connected with so many, really, really, smart people and good thinkers. I made so many connections. It's I find it fascinating, right? Just what people talk about, what they post. Often the comment sections are even more interesting, right? Where people stress test ideas, that kind of stuff. So I use LinkedIn quite a lot, and then podcasts. I think you've got a couple of sites, right? Like Green Book. I think Mike Stevens, the Insights platform. Yes, some fabulous stuff. Of course, I Punk MRX, right? Calling that out again, which I find fascinating. Fascinating community. Very different, right? Very frank, and very people coming from very diverse perspectives, but in a very it feels like a warm bath a bit. That's
Yeah, I agree. And I love the fact that there are channels separated in channels that are both professional but also personal. So lurking in that music channel quite a bit, which is that's some new so yeah, good stuff. Good stuff.
So join that, people. Join it.
Yeah,
Punk MRX.
For sure. All right, Bernice. So you said you're a fan of the podcast, so you know what's coming now. This is the question I'm super interested to understand and to find out. So I know you grew up playing guitar. I know nothing really about your music tastes. Maybe a little bit, some hints that I picked up on Punk MRX.
Yeah.
All right, so you're stranded on a desert island, right? You have 3 albums of your choosing to keep you company for the rest of your days. What are they?
You sure I can't do 10? I can't bribe you with some because it's really the hardest thing. It's like, I've got 4 kids, like you need to pick the 3, your 3 favorites. Anyway, all right, so I thought about it, and I think the first one, so my coming of age music is grunge, right? That's when, I'm a big grunge fan, right? Like Pumpkins, Alice in Chains, Soundgarden. So I was thinking, okay, which one do I pick? I ended up with picking an album by a band called Mother Love Bone.
Yes,
you heard of them?
Love Bone.
A band called Apple, which is a fantastic album. And they were like, I don't think grunge would have been what it was if Mother Love Bone never existed, right? Because they just made one album. Singer died of a heroin overdose by the time it was released, and then Chris Cornell from Soundgarden put this beautiful band together, Temple of the Dog, to do and from that Pearl Jam and all this kind of stuff. That's such a fantastic album, especially if you listen it back. And I think a lot of the members went to Pearl Jam later. And if you listen to that album, you just hear what Pearl Jam, where they come from, right? Just all these influences. So that would be my number 1 choice. And then number 2, I'm also, a big fan of 70s rock, right? And I love live albums because I think especially nowadays, everyone can, make a decent CD, right? But the proof is really in, can you make a really good live album? So it's okay. I want to have a 70s live album. Initially, I was thinking of, Zeppelin song remains the same, or, Deep Purple Made in Japan, which is
I love that one.
Brilliant. But I ended up, I think, if I'm on the desert island, I think I would go with Neil Young with Live Rust. which was recorded 79, which is a beautiful, very, emotional album, right? Because he was still dealing with, some of his bandmates who also died of heroin abuse. And I think Neil Young is one of these artists who is probably the only one that, stayed relevant throughout his, 60, 70-year career, right? He's still making music. That's good. So that would be my second one. And my third one, it would have to be a singer-songwriter, because I love beautiful songs, right? I just like singer-songwriter. So the first one that pops to mind is Jeff Buckley, but I'm like, okay, I can't have just only men in my... So my third one would be a singer-songwriter called...
Huge Jeff Buckley fan, by the way. So, yeah, okay.
Have you seen the documentary or not?
I have not.
Watch it. Anyway. So it has to be a woman, right? I can't have only men in my, my desert island. That's a bit odd. So I choose a lady called Amy Mann. She made a live album called Live at Saint and Warehouse. Now, Amy Mann, she's a fabulous, singer-songwriter who makes, really, really beautiful songs, but very dark and sardonic texts, right? And she has a very interesting, because I was reading up on her background. So she started with playing in punk bands and new wave bands. She even played with Ministry for a while on bass. And then she made a pivot, right, as we call it nowadays, to just singer-songwriting. And she made this, fabulous music. I saw her once live in Singapore. Just brilliant. Her music is really, really a different level. So.
Yeah, so I remember her from Till Tuesday when she was in that band. Right? She was the singer for Till Tuesday.
I think so. Yeah.
They had a couple of hit songs in the States when I was. But she's always I've always been very interested in her. But I need to. What was the name of the album that you're recommending? I'd love to give it a listen.
I think it's her only live album. It's called Live at St. Anne's Warehouse.
I'm gonna check it out. Super cool.
So that's it. And then I'm going to be very sad on that island for all the 99 albums that I was not allowed to take, right? But I'll make my own podcast and I'll invite you, and then we'll do the 100 albums thing.
There you go. I'll drop by. Maybe I'll drop by and you can do a swap out.
Oh, yeah. That's good. Yeah.
All right, Bernice. Really appreciate this. It was great to dig a little bit deeper into your background. It's really fascinating. Your journey, and like I said, I'm super glad that you're still very active in sharing your thoughts on what's happening in the space at such an interesting time. So hopefully the next time we chat, Bernice, somewhere it's somewhere in person, we can figure
that would be great.
Figure it out somehow. Talk soon. Rock and roll.